Well, the Benghazi talking points getting a serious makeover. According to a new report from ABC News, there were 12 different versions of the administration's account on the terror attack, and that many of the changes came from the State Department and not from the intelligence community, contradicting what the White House has been saying for months. The revisions reportedly include deleting references to an al-Qaeda-backed group. Stephen Yates, he's a former deputy assistant to the Vice President for National Security Affairs, and he joins us now. Thank you for joining us.
Happy to, Heather. Thank you.
All right, so let's get straight to it. 12 versions of talking points that ultimately were false. The State Department, at least one member of the National Security Council, and the White House were involved in those changes. Do you believe the president was involved in the changes?
Well, we have no evidence the president was involved in the changes thus far, but very, very clear that this was not a low-level decision made by bureaucrats and others in the system. It was a communications and messaging exercise. And at that time in a presidential campaign, that could only have involved the most senior advisors to the president at the very least.
So we do know we have 4 brave Americans. They are now dead. No one under arrest or in jail except for the producer of the YouTube video that we now know had nothing to do with it, who is still in jail on a probation violation. If this had happened in a non-election year, would the messaging, would the response following the attack have been different? Was it important for President Obama's re-election to not include references to al-Qaeda or, say, terrorist attack?
I do think that there were political and policy issues at stake there that put the campaign in jeopardy. I mean, this came at a time when the president had a poor debate performance, the issue of being a commander-in-chief, and this light footprint, light security approach to the broader Middle East, especially in Libya, was put forward as supposedly a successful model. This was unraveling in a short period of time.
All right, so let's talk about White House Press Secretary Jay Carney. He was grilled, to say the least, on Friday over this latest information. He said, what we said and what remains true to this day is that the intelligence community drafted and redrafted these points. That's a quote. He defended the administration's claims that the faulty statements were merely the product of incomplete intelligence in a rapidly changing environment. But Victoria Nuland, State Department spokesperson, we now know that she pressed the CIA to scrub references to prior security warnings. Even then, CIA Director David Petraeus said that he was surprised all references to al-Qaeda and jihadists were removed. So what's your response to that?
Well, I think the idea that these talking points and the final version were the result of inputs from agencies is verifiably false. We don't have a complete set of information, but there are no indications that initial assessments said anything other than it was a terrorist attack, and even naming some of the groups involved. The hearings this past week and some of this reporting made clear who was not responsible for providing the false narrative. It did not come from the CIA. It did not come from the Benghazi consulate. It didn't come from Embassy Tripoli. It came from communications people inside the White House and across the administration.
Clearly, Greg Hicks, his testimony was not what we were led to believe initially. What does Congress now need to do to find out the truth?
Well, they have to recall and maybe call initially some of the more senior people of the State Department. Congress can be shielded in many ways by executive privilege from going after people in the White House, but there are a lot of people that were involved in the communications circle on that fateful day and the responses afterwards. The hearings to date got very close to who was responsible for walking back the narrative on terrorism, but we have no indication of where did the YouTube video come from. And as hearings made clear this last week, that had real strategic consequences. It disrupted the government in Libya. It delayed our FBI investigation. It had real-world consequences, and it matters to follow up on that.
Yeah, and as an answer to Hillary Clinton's question, what does it matter? It delayed that, the FBI being able to get in there, they said between 15 to 18 days.
Right, and during that period of time, the situation was picked very clean. There is no way a crime scene sits well and your investigation proceeds better over time. And as anyone can rightly note now, no one has been brought forward as a lead in custody or leading to further information to narrow the spread of the Islamist challenge that took the lives of these people that day.
All right, just quickly, should we hear from the Obama administration's National Security Chief, Tom Donilon? We haven't so far.
We haven't, and that's very conspicuous, because when you have a national security crisis, that is the person who sort of spans the White House and the national security system. In fact, it's quite odd he wasn't the person to come forward to deliver those talking points instead of Susan Rice at that time.
Stephen Yates, thank you so much for joining us. More will definitely develop.
Thank you.
Thanks.
More indeed. I haven't seen a press secretary get beat up the way Jay Carney got beat up yesterday by the press corps since Ron Ziegler hauled off and dismissed Watergate as a third-rate burglary. There wasn't a single reporter, it seemed to me, that believed a word that Jay Carney was peddling yesterday.
Do you think Jay Carney believed it?
Who knows, but I know this much. He's lost a lot of credibility. And when you're the chief spokesman for the president and you have little or no credibility, you're in trouble.
Credibility counts.
Yep.